I'm going to start with some 4x6 pieces of chipboard that's been cut from just some food packaging. A lot of people use cereal boxes or any boxes that come with food, or like Kleenex boxes work. I just let them pile up, and then when I'm sitting in front of the TV, I cut a stack so that I always have postcard blanks. So these are 4x6, and I cut them using an L square and a craft knife on a craft mat. But you can also use some paper cutters will accept lightweight chipboard, and it's not really heavy. It's pretty lightweight. So that's what I like to use for bases for my postcards. But if you have like watercolor paper or any art paper that you like to use, just something that's sturdy enough to accept a lot of gluing and wet media. So what I'm going to do is cover these with some dictionary pages. And this is just a signature that I've torn out of an old dictionary. I buy those at the thrift store or at the used bookstore for $1, because nobody loves old reference books that have gone out of date. And I like to use, rather than using pages that have images on them, I like to use pages that are all text. So the really easy way to do this is just get a glue stick and glue up the base. And I use just plain Avery glue sticks. You know, some people like to use other brands, the stuff that is purple and turns clear. I don't love those. I like plain old Avery. And now I'm just going to line this up on the top of the page and then flip it over and run my brayer over it. Make sure everything's nice and flat. And then I can trim this up using scissors or a craft knife or whatever cutting implement that you choose. Once the postcards are trimmed down, I usually go around and check all the corners to make sure that they're glued down. Sometimes I don't get the glue all the way out to the edge. So now these postcards have been drying for about half an hour. And because I put a book on top of them, they're still relatively flat. When you put glue on these or any wet media, they tend to curl a little bit. So any opportunity that I have to put a weight on top of it to keep the postcards flat, I do that. So the next thing I'm going to do is prime these with a little bit of gesso. So I'm just using a little bit of gesso and a foam makeup sponge. And I apply the gesso directly to the postcard rather than using a palette, because I don't want to waste too much. I'm already wasting a little bit around the edges here. So, and I'm not trying to obliterate the text. I'm just adding a little primer coat so that my acrylic paint will grab on. So just a tiny bit, and then spread it around with your sponge. You can get packages of these foam sponges in the makeup section of most stores, or I buy mine at the dollar store. Anytime I'm in there, I just throw a pack into my basket. I'm going to do a little sort of sky background, and I have my palette set up. I use little styrofoam plates for palettes, and I have a little bit of light blue acrylic and a little bit of white and a foam makeup sponge and also a dampened sea sponge. So I'm going to start with light blue. I'm going to run it around the outer edge. And I'm mostly going to focus on the right side because most of the left side is going to be covered with a flower. So I'm just sort of doing a little uneven background. I think I'm going to add another color of blue to this. Just a little bit of a darker blue. So I'm just patting with my sponge to make an uneven background. Now I'm going to use my sea sponge and I'm just going to load a tiny bit of white onto it. And I'm working back and forth, so adding a little bit of white and then blending it with the other side of the sponge. Oops. There. And that's about as much background as I want to do. And I did all of that very lightly so that you can still see the dictionary page through all the paint. So very often when people do layered backgrounds and they're having trouble with layering, it's because they're working too heavy with paint. So you just want to work very lightly so that the layers underneath continue to show through just a little bit. And in some places they show through more than others, and that's a good thing. That's called lost and found. You want the background to show a lot in some places and a little bit in others. And that's sort of what I've got going on the right side here. And again, I'm sort of ignoring the left side because this is going to go over the top of it and it's going to sort of wipe out most of the left side, and only the right side background is going to show. So here I have my light blue, and you can see that I didn't really add a lot of paint once I loaded up that initial time. I just sort of used the foam sponge to spread around what's already on. So I can get quite a bit of coverage out of just a little bit of paint. And that helps with that lost and found layering. And then while this is still wet, just a tiny bit of blue. And I usually start in a corner and work my way out. So it makes sense for it to be darker around the corners and around the outer edges. And then a little bit of white and a little bit of blending with the wet sponge. And that's it. I'm getting ready to apply my image, and these are images that I printed from the Sunflower color and collage set from 102 Studios. But you can use any sort of line work image that has open areas for you to color. And I just printed this out on plain paper with my laser printer, and I've cut around the image where I want it to lay on the background. And you'll notice that I haven't cut some areas, and that's because this image is going to lay on here sort of like this. So there's no reason for me to cut this away because I'm going to cut this off straight. So to cut out these images, use a sharp pair of detail scissors, and you'll notice that I've cut off this extra leaf because there's not really room for it on a postcard. So just cut on the lines, and when you come to an area that's a point like this, you want to cut into it rather than trying to turn the scissors around in that little point. So always cut into your V shapes, just like this. Cut one side and then cut into the other side to get a nice crisp point. To apply this, I'm going to use a glue stick and a brayer. And then once the glue dries, I'll use some matte medium over the top, both to lock the image down and keep the glue stick from lifting, and to give me a surface to paint on. So I want to make sure and get glue on all of these little points, and the way to do that is to work from the center outward, like that. And then I want to gently position this. And roll over it with a brayer to make sure I get good contact. And then I'm going to cut off the excess while it's still wet. Just like that. So now that this glue is set, I'm just going to do a very light coat of matte medium over the top. And in the same way that I used the glue outward when I was gluing the petals down, now I'm using the matte medium inward. And the reason I'm doing that is just in case any of these petals, any of the points, have not gotten good contact or aren't stuck down properly, the matte medium will slide underneath and hold them down. So, and I'm going to do that all the way around. And just for grins, I'm also going to put matte medium over the bare background, and that's to give me a nice even surface. This matte medium also acts as a little bit of a primer for the acrylics that I'm going to use over the top of it. Sometimes I do this and use a little bit of gesso, and I just confine that to the area that is going to be colored. Or if you have it, you can also use clear gesso to help stick the petals down and also act as a primer for the acrylic. So now I'm ready to start painting, and I'm going to do this with some glazes made from acrylics and matte medium to thin it down about 50%, and then a tiny bit of water. You really don't want to thin acrylics with too much water. If you get beyond half water and half acrylic, the binder starts to fail and your paints won't stick to your surface. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to start with the leaves and the stem. And I'm just going to paint. This is like coloring in the lines. But because I'm using glazes, the lines that define the coloring sheet are going to show through. I just use my finger to wipe away any that is too dark or too heavy or flows over the edge. And I'm going to do a little bit of extra glaze right here where there would be a shadow. And I can come back and do a second layer if I want to make some places darker and some places lighter. And I tend to paint from the back forward, so the leaves are sort of sitting behind the flower, and the center of the flower is sort of sitting forward of the petals. So my order of painting is leaves, and then petals, and then center. And that's just my personal preference. It doesn't matter. I do it that way because if I get any yellow onto the area that I've already painted with green, it looks realistic and natural, whereas if I get green on an area where I've already painted petals, it looks kind of weird. And that's because the green is being pulled forward instead of receding into the background. I know that sounds weird, but that's my thinking, and that's how I do it. So you probably don't need to watch me paint all 6 of these with green. I'm just going to go through and do all of them exactly the same. And that's my personal preference again, doing all the stems, then all the petals, then all the centers. And that's so that I get them consistent. So this one is dry, or relatively dry. So now I'm going to come back in and do another layer to do some shadowing. And I'm doing that with some paint that's been thinned just a little bit less with matte medium. So it's got a little more pigment in it. Here. So now it doesn't look so flat. So now I've loaded up my palette with 3 colors, light, medium, and dark yellow. And I'm going to do the same thing that I just did with the green with the 3 yellows. I'm going to start off with the lightest color, which is my highlight color. And I'm just going to cover this whole flower minus the center with yellow. And I did the same thing, thinning the paint down with a lot of matte medium and then just a tiny bit of water to make it flow so that it's more of a wash and less really thick, dense paint. And I always try to do my paint strokes in the direction of whatever I'm painting. So this flower, I want to do it from the center outward as much as possible. And sometimes I'll do that and then paint outward from the scribble. So get a little paint on there and then radiate it outward. And I wanted to say that I'm doing this with acrylic glazes, but you could just as easily do this with watercolors or colored pencils or crayons or whatever you have. And I chose to apply my flower first and then color it, but you could just as easily color the flower and then apply it when it's finished, assuming that you're using a medium that will allow you to glue and matte medium over the top of it. So that's all done. Now I'm going to take my middle tone and a little bit of matte medium, and I'm going to go in and paint. Oops, that's a little too thick. A little bit of water, 1 dot of water. And I'm going to go in and paint anywhere I don't want there to be a highlight, but I also don't want there to be a shadow. And that's kind of designer's choice. This sunflower is really easy to paint that way because it has so many places for highlights and shadows and midtones that you can just sort of make it up as you go along. I'm not being real neat about this. Just kind of slapping the paint down there. And to keep my brush strokes and my application really consistent, I'm rotating the postcard rather than trying to paint my way around the circle. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the darkest color, which is not really all that dark. It's kind of a yellow-orange. I'm just going to do this a few places where the color would be darker. once this dries, I can come back in and bump up the color a little bit if I want to. Add a little more bright yellow if I want to. But getting that first coat of color down very quickly and not overthinking it really helps. Now I'm going to do the center, and I'm doing it the same way I did the rest of the postcard. Some acrylic and some matte medium and a tiny bit of water. And I've got two colors of brown here, light and dark. So I'm just going to apply some of the light, kind of scribble it all over. Not worried about getting every part of this covered with brown. And then, while it's still wet, I'm going to take a little bit of the darker and go around the outside. And this I am being a little bit more careful. I'm making sure that all of the outer sections get covered. But again, kind of using that scribbling motion to get the paint down. And then I'm just going to blend a little. So that some places are darker and some are lighter. And while it's still wet, I can lighten it up a little bit if I want to. And that's it. And the centers all come out very different depending on how much light and how much dark I put on them. I'm going to do two more things to finish these postcards off. The first one is to just do a light coat of matte medium over the whole thing, just to give it a sealer. Make sure the surface is protected a little bit, since these are going to go through the mail. The last thing I'm going to do is cover the back of each postcard with something that I can write on so that I can address them and send them off in the mail. And you can do this with white paper or white cardstock or anything you want. My favorite thing to use is a blank white index card. I buy no-line index cards at Staples in packs of like 500 because I do all sorts of stuff with them, and this is one of them. So I'm just gonna apply glue stick and get it all the way around, and I'm doing this on an old phone book, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I'm getting it all glued up, making sure that I get all the way around the edges. And then I'm going to line up the bottom with the bottom of the postcard. And get a piece of wax paper. And roll this over. And I'm going to let this sit weighted by a book so that it flattens out, and then when it's flat and dry, I'll trim the excess white away and I'll have a nice neat back that I can write on.